The ballroom shimmered in gold and crystal, the kind of opulence that made you check your tie twice before stepping onto the floor. Waiters in black vests moved silently between round tables, topping off champagne flutes and delivering plates too pretty to eat. My name was printed in gold lettering on a white linen place card, Elliot Grant, seated at the head table. I ran my fingers over it for the fifth time. It still didn't feel real. The Employee of the Year plaque sat on the table beside me, still warm from the stage lights. Applause had barely faded when the CEO handed me the mic and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Say a few words, Elliot. You've earned it." I stood, legs steady but heart slamming against my ribs. The crowd of 200 looked up at me, smiling, waiting, judging. My eyes flicked to Marcus, seated just two places down. He smiled too, but his eyes didn't match his mouth. He'd handed me a glass of champagne moments earlier, said something like, "To your success," and clinked my glass before taking a long sip from his. I hadn't touched mine. I held the flute now, raising it slightly as I spoke. "I'm honored, truly, but I didn't get here alone. This award belongs to the team that worked late nights, chased impossible deadlines, and still made space to laugh at my terrible attempts at morning small talk." There was a polite laugh, a few nods. Marcus's smile didn't waver, but he shifted in his seat. I also want to say something about integrity. In this industry, success can come quickly, but so can shortcuts. I've seen both. I've learned that no matter how fast you climb, your foundation better be solid. Otherwise, you'll fall, and people will remember how. I raised the glass higher. Around the room, others mirrored the motion. Marcus, too. He looked a little pale now, one hand loosely pressed to his stomach. I watched him sip again, slower this time. His grin faltered. "To staying grounded," I said, and drank. I only took a sip, more for form than taste. Then I set the glass down, and the applause returned, light at first, then building. But my attention was elsewhere. Marcus's hand trembled now. His eyes darted toward the exits, then back to his half-finished drink. A sheen of sweat gathered on his forehead. He stood up too fast, bumping his chair with a loud scrape. A waiter moved toward him, but he waved him off and stumbled toward the hallway, nearly colliding with someone from HR. I watched him go, the crowd too polite to notice. Yet, my smile stayed in place, calm, steady. He handed me that drink with a smirk and a toast. I'd simply returned the favor, with a stage, a spotlight, and a room full of witnesses. And karma? Karma had just walked in, right on schedule. The applause had barely died down when I noticed the shift, a quiet murmur from the left side of the room. Silverware paused midair. A few people stood. I didn't need to look to know it was Marcus. I'd seen the sweat gathering on his forehead, the tremble in his hand when he raised that glass. He never saw it coming. I sat down calmly, sliding the untouched champagne flute further away from me, and reached for my water instead. The CEO leaned over, muttered something about checking on Marcus, then disappeared behind the velvet curtain with two board members in tow. I didn't follow. I already knew how this was going to play out. The truth is, I wasn't supposed to be here. I wasn't supposed to be the one with the plaque, the spotlight, the keynote slot next quarter. That was the role Marcus Hale had been preparing for since the day he walked through the front doors of Harlan and West. Clean-cut, Ivy League, sharp-tongued, always ready with the kind of pitch that sounded good in the boardroom, even if it rarely survived the client. He called me old school once. I'd taken it as a compliment. He didn't mean it that way. I started at the company when it was still small, 10 of us sharing one printer and folding brochures by hand. My office had no door, just a partition and a view of the parking lot. I wasn't flashy, but I knew how to build trust. Clients stayed, word spread, and eventually so did my title. But recognition came late and not without bruises. I watched people like Marcus get promoted faster, speak louder, win favor with half the effort. I wasn't bitter, just aware. People like him were hired to be seen. People like me stayed late to fix the mess. Still, when I landed the Harrison account, our biggest in 5 years, something shifted. Suddenly, the execs who used to forget my name were asking for lunch meetings. HR started checking in more. And Marcus? Marcus smiled tighter, clapped harder, asked more questions he already knew the answers to. He congratulated me with the warmth of a man holding a grudge just below skin level. Then came the nomination, Executive of the Year. I didn't campaign, didn't politic. I just kept showing up, doing what I always did, solving problems without creating new ones. And somehow that was enough, until it wasn't, until a drink was handed to me with too much charm, too much eagerness. To your success, Marcus had said, holding his glass just a little too long. I didn't drink it, he did. And now, while they scrambled to figure out what happened, I sat at the edge of the glittering stage, my name still echoing off the ballroom walls, and thought about how many years I'd spent being overlooked. Funny thing about the shadows, sometimes they're where the real power lives. They say success changes people, that it goes to your head, makes you arrogant, careless, maybe even cruel. But that's not true. Success doesn't change you, it reveals who's been pretending all along. I'd seen it in Marcus for years. The charming act, the backslaps, the perfectly timed compliments in public, and the subtle digs in private. He knew how to play a room, but he never learned how to earn respect without wearing a mask. I remember the first time I met him. I was 37, already leading a team and juggling clients that half the junior execs couldn't handle. He was 35 then, newly hired, sharp suit, confident smirk. Walked into the strategy meeting like he'd owned the place in a past life. The managing director introduced him as a rising star. Marcus sat beside me and leaned over. You're Elliot Grant, right? The guy who closed Meridian? I nodded. Impressive. I've read your decks. Old school, but effective. He smiled, and I knew even then, he meant both parts. It didn't take long for him to climb. He had a gift for aligning himself with whoever held the power in the room. If the CEO quoted a book, Marcus would post a review of it on LinkedIn by noon. If a client mentioned golf, Marcus suddenly owned clubs. I didn't mind. I was never the loudest. I didn't need to be. I let the numbers speak. But what bothered me, what eventually told me exactly who he was the way he handled setbacks. Not with humility, not with grace, with sabotage. Quiet, careful. And if you weren't watching closely, almost invisible. A few years ago, a junior analyst named Ruben, smart kid, sharp mind, beat Marcus to a lead role on a tech client. Within 2 months, Ruben was written up twice for miscommunications and missed deliverables. By the end of the quarter, he was gone. Quiet exit, no fight. He didn't want to burn bridges. Marcus took over the account the following Monday. I didn't say anything then, just like I didn't say anything when another project manager mysteriously dropped off a high-visibility campaign Marcus was eyeing. But I noticed. I always notice. So when I saw him that night at the awards dinner, all charm and champagne, I paid attention. The way he hovered near the drinks. The glass he insisted I take from his hand instead of the server's tray. The look that flickered across his face when I accepted it without a word. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd be too proud, too distracted, too grateful to see the knife in the smile. What he didn't know is, men like me don't forget where we came from, and we sure as hell don't forget how to survive. So I raised the glass. I gave the toast, and I watched him drink the very thing he meant for me. The chaos didn't hit all at once. It crept in, the way real panic always does. Soft at first, like the buzz of a phone vibrating on a hard table. A few guests noticed Marcus swaying in his seat. One of the interns leaned toward him, probably asking if he was all right. He nodded too fast, smiled too wide. But that smile cracked when he tried to stand and knocked over his chair instead. That got the room's attention. He mumbled something no one understood and took 2 shaky steps toward the exit, then dropped to his knees. People gasped. Someone screamed. A waiter ran to him. The CEO shot up from the head table. HR followed. I didn't move. I just watched. They gathered around him, suits and silk gowns, frantic voices layered over the faint hum of the band, still playing in the background. Too slow to notice the emergency. The music finally cut out when someone yelled to kill the sound. Marcus was half conscious now, his mouth open but no words coming out. Sweat pooled at his collar. One of the partners barked at someone to call an ambulance. The lights felt hotter, sharper, Like the moment before a camera flash. I looked down at the champagne flute in front of me, the one Marcus had handed me, still untouched. I slid it to the side, just far enough to make sure HR would see it when they eventually started asking the right questions. A woman at the next table whispered, "Did he have too much to drink?" Someone else murmured, "No, that didn't look like alcohol." From across the room, our eyes met, just for a second. Marcus, slumped on the carpet, gasping, eyes wide, and in that single glance he understood. I knew. Not just about the drink, not just about tonight. I knew everything. And I wasn't playing by his rules anymore. I stood then, not rushed, not dramatic, just calm, steady. I walked to the edge of the crowd as EMTs burst through the doors. Someone tried to stop me. "Mr. Grant, do you know what happened?" But I shook my head gently and kept walking. I had nothing to say, not yet. I stepped out into the cool night air, the velvet ropes swinging shut behind me. The sound inside was muffled now, distant. I took a deep breath, let it sit in my lungs, and exhaled slowly. He tried to break me tonight, but I don't break easy. And this was just the beginning. By the time I got home, my phone had already buzzed half a dozen times. Missed calls from HR, a text from the CEO. "Hope you're all right. We'll be in touch tomorrow." I didn't respond. I set the champagne-stained jacket on the back of a chair, loosened my tie, and poured myself a glass of water. No champagne, no celebration. Not yet. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a moment like that. The kind that doesn't feel peaceful, just loaded. Like the air is still processing what it witnessed. I sat in it, let it stretch, let it settle. I replayed everything in my head. The way Marcus had hovered near the drinks table, waving off the server, the way he insisted I take that glass, the barely contained satisfaction in his voice. "To your moment," he said. Not our moment, not congratulations. He made sure it was mine. And it was, just not for the reason he hoped. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the contact labeled Mitch-Lab. We'd gone to college together. He was a chem major turned private toxicologist, made a living testing everything from tainted food to high-end wine. I'd helped him redo his website a few years back. We weren't close, but I knew he owed me one. I typed, "Need a favor," quietly. "I have a glass that may have been tampered with. Can you test it?" I didn't wait for a reply. I rinsed the champagne flute, sealed it in a Ziploc bag, and placed it carefully in a small, padded shipping box. I'd drop it at the overnight courier first thing in the morning, because Marcus Hale wasn't just reckless. He was stupid. And that was a mistake I was never going to let slide. The next morning, I arrived at the office just before 8. The building felt too quiet, as if everyone was still holding their breath from the night before. I walked past the front desk. The receptionist didn't make eye contact. I got to my office and found a white envelope sitting neatly on my keyboard. Inside, a formal letter. "You are not under investigation, but we are conducting a review of the events that occurred at the company gala. Please refrain from discussing the matter until further notice." Classic corporate move. No one wants to say we think you did it, but they'll freeze you out while they look into things. I folded the letter, placed it in my desk drawer, and got to work like nothing had happened. Emails, client calls, project planning. If they wanted to watch me, fine. I had nothing to hide. Marcus, on the other hand, he tried to poison my reputation, my name, my life. He didn't know it yet, but I was about to return the favor. Only this time, I'd let the truth do the work for me. Quiet, clean, undeniable. 3 days later, I was in the middle of drafting a quarterly projection report when my phone lit up with a name I'd been waiting on. "Mitch, lab," I answered before the second ring. "Elliot," he said, "whatever was in that glass wasn't just alcohol." I didn't speak, just waited. There were clear traces of benzodiazepines, specifically alprazolam. High dosage. We're talking fast-acting sedative, drowsiness, loss of coordination, memory gaps. If someone wasn't expecting it, it could knock them out cold. Or worse. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. "You're sure?" "I ran it twice. Sample was clean. Glass had only minor contact with liquid, just enough for residue, and I'm guessing it was meant for you. It was. Mitch paused. You gonna press charges? No, I said quietly. Not yet. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, staring at the glowing spreadsheet in front of me, the meaningless rows of numbers. Marcus had tried to drug me. That wasn't paranoia anymore. That wasn't a hunch. It was evidence. Confirmed, documented, scientific. He'd actually done it, and he'd failed. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus had always prided himself on being calculated, efficient. But now he was sloppy. And that mistake gave me the one thing I never had with him before. Leverage, not gossip, not speculation, proof. I spent the rest of the afternoon gathering emails, meeting invites, Slack messages, anything that showed the subtle power plays, the quiet ways he tried to shift perception around me, planting doubts, whispering in the right ears. I called in a favor from a friend in IT. Nothing illegal, just old security logs from the week before the gala. Turns out Marcus had scheduled a private meeting with one of the junior HR reps. The subject line was vague, but the timestamp was 2 hours after I got my nomination email. Of course it was. I created a folder on my desktop and labeled it Insurance. Dropped everything in it, the lab report, the logs, the screenshots. I wasn't ready to hand it over. Not yet. But I wanted it all in one place. Neat, controlled, ready. Later that night, I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the balcony. The city buzzed below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably spinning a story about his reaction, about how he must have been allergic to something, or how someone else made the switch. He didn't know I had the evidence. He didn't know I was building a case. He thought I was the quiet one, the steady one, the one who played by the rules and turned the other cheek. And for a long time I was, but not anymore. Now I was just patient, and Marcus Hale was running out of time. The next morning, Marcus returned to the office. He walked in like nothing had happened. Fresh suit, slicked back hair, a Band-Aid over his pride. I watched him from my office window as he strolled through the open workspace, nodding at people who quickly looked away. The charm was still there, but it didn't land the same. His presence didn't ripple anymore. It dragged. He caught my eye as he passed, gave me a slow, tight smile. I didn't smile back. By mid-morning, the whispers were louder than the keyboards. Everyone had seen the gala. Everyone had watched him stagger out like a collapsing building. The company line was unfortunate reaction, but no one bought it. Not really. People aren't stupid. They just wait for someone else to say the obvious. I wasn't going to be that someone, not yet. Just after lunch, I got the invite. Private meeting, Marcus Hale and Elliot Grant, 3:30 p.m., conference room D. Of course, I showed up 2 minutes early. Marcus was already there, seated with his arms folded, jacket off, collar loose. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Elliot, he said, standing to shake my hand. I took the seat opposite him. He leaned forward. Look, I don't know what you think happened the other night, but I wanted to clear the air. You and we've worked together a long time. Let's not let some unfortunate misunderstanding derail that. I didn't speak. I was sick, that's all. Bad shrimp, maybe? Champagne on an empty stomach? Whatever it wasn't what people are saying. I studied him. And what are people saying? He smiled thinly. Doesn't matter. I just want to make sure there's no bad blood between us. There it was, the real reason for this meeting. Not concern, not clarity, control. He wasn't here to deny what happened. He was here to see how much I knew. I reached into my bag, pulled out a sealed envelope, and slid it across the table. He didn't touch it. What's this? Lab results. His expression didn't change, but his left hand tightened slightly on the edge of the table. You had it tested? I nodded. And I have everything else I need. Timeline, motive, patterns, and witnesses if it comes to that. He laughed softly. You planning to take me down, Elliot? Is that it? No, I said calmly. I'm planning to let you do it yourself. Silence stretched between us. I'm not going to HR. Not yet, but I've documented everything. If you make one move, one whisper, one false accusation, one more person pushed off a project they earned, I'll release everything. And I won't just give it to the board. I'll make sure it lands in every inbox from here to corporate. He stared at me for a long moment. You always were the quiet one, he said finally. I stood. Yeah, and you mistook that for weakness. That's on you. I left the room without another word. Let him sit with it. Let him wonder how much time he had left. The clock was ticking, and I wasn't rushing the end. Marcus didn't come after me directly after that. Not with emails, not with whispers, not with sudden scheduling conflicts or HR complaints. He was smart enough to know when the ground beneath him was starting to crack. But I saw the signs, the missed meetings, the nervous glances at his phone, the subtle way his name started disappearing from client updates. No announcement, no formal demotion, just a slow erosion of relevance, the same way he'd done to others. Only now it was happening to him. And I wasn't done. That Friday, I met with a woman named Melanie Rusk, former senior strategist, quiet, capable, had left the company 2 years ago under what Marcus had once described as personal issues. But when I called her, her voice had tightened. You're calling about Marcus, aren't you? I am. She agreed to meet. We sat in a coffee shop near Midtown. She looked older than I remembered, tired but sharper, like someone who'd spent 2 years learning how to name the damage. He did the same thing to me, she said, stirring a tea she hadn't touched. Got close, asked questions like he cared, then started correcting my timelines to execs, rerouting emails, making it look like I missed approvals I never even saw. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She gave a dry laugh. Because by the time I realized what was happening, it already looked like I was the problem. I slid a small recorder across the table. Would you be willing to talk about it on the record? She didn't even flinch, just hit the button and started talking. By Monday morning, I had 3 former employees, 3 similar stories, 3 broken careers, all touched by Marcus Hale. I compiled everything. Melanie's testimony, the lab report, the meeting footage, even an email Marcus had sent weeks earlier hinting I was struggling with the pressure of the promotion. Then I did the one thing he never expected. I booked time with the CEO. No assistance, no gatekeeping. Just 15 minutes behind closed doors. I laid it out with zero emotion, just the facts. Then I slid the flash drive across his desk. He picked it up, stared at it for a moment. This is everything? It's enough. And you don't want to go through HR? Number, I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to protect this place from people who poison it quietly. He nodded once. We'll handle it. I stood to leave. Elliot, he said as I opened the door, you sure you don't want a bigger role in this company? I looked back at him. I already have one. I kept it standing. And just like that, the end began. Not for me, for Marcus. Marcus didn't show up to work on Tuesday. No emails, no out-of-office reply. Just silence. By Wednesday, his name was pulled from the Q4 leadership slate. Projects he was once driving were reassigned. No fanfare, no gossip in the open. But the message was clear. His seat at the table was no longer guaranteed. People noticed. In the break room, I overheard 2 junior associates whispering, "He's on leave?" Medical, supposedly. Didn't look sick to me. Just scared. I kept my head down, sipped my coffee, said nothing. By Friday, it was official. A company-wide email landed mid-afternoon. Cold. Clinical. Marcus Hale will be transitioning out of his role at Harlan and West, effective immediately. We thank him for his contributions and wish him the best in his future endeavors. No farewell lunch, no LinkedIn post, no fake cake in conference room, be gone. I stared at the screen for a while, letting the weight of it settle. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, not exactly, just closure, the kind you don't celebrate out loud. Later that evening, as the office cleared out, I stepped into the empty executive boardroom, closed the door, no audience, no speech, just me. I took out my phone, opened the voice memos, and deleted the last recording. Melanie's voice disappeared into digital silence. I didn't need it anymore. Marcus was out. The cleanup had begun, and I had no interest in dragging it through the mud. That weekend, I got an email from HR, formal, stiff, but buried in the language was the sentence I'd been waiting for. After a comprehensive review, we have found no wrongdoing on your part and appreciate your professionalism during this matter. Professionalism. That was their word for what I did. I called it restraint because I could have buried him. I could have sent that file to the industry board, the clients he screwed over, even the press, but I didn't. Not because I owed him mercy, because I owed myself peace. The following Monday, the CEO pulled me aside after the leadership meeting. "You kept this company from a lawsuit," he said quietly. "From a scandal." I shrugged. "I just told the truth. Most people wouldn't have waited." "I wasn't most people." He nodded, then handed me a sealed envelope. "Your bonus, amended to reflect the quarter's complications. And there's something else in there too." Inside was a check, larger than expected, and a formal offer for a newly created position. Head of Strategy, North Division. Permanent. Autonomous. Mine. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just shook his hand, returned to my office, and sat down at the same desk where all this began. And for the first time in a long while, the silence around me didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The summit in Chicago was different. Not because of the speakers or the fancy hotel or the carefully catered lunches. I'd been to 100 of those before. No, it was different because, for the first time, I wasn't attending as someone trying to prove I belonged. I was there because I'd earned the space I stood in, and I wasn't afraid of losing it anymore. After my session, building teams that outlast politics, a woman approached me, mid-30s, sharp eyes, confident posture. She introduced herself as a regional director from Denver. "I heard about what happened at your firm," she said quietly once we were out of earshot. "Word travels." I waited, didn't confirm, didn't deny. She smiled. "You kept it clean. Most people in your position would have gone public. Blown it all up. Wouldn't have helped anyone," I said. "Least of all the people still working there." She nodded slowly. "That's rare." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That evening, back in my hotel room, I stood by the window, staring out at the city. Chicago glittered below, glass towers, endless headlights, lives intersecting for a moment before veering in different directions. I thought about all the ways the last few months could have gone differently. If I had reacted in anger, if I'd taken the bait, if I'd let Marcus drag me down to his level. But I didn't. I'd held the line. Not just for me, but for the people watching quietly, hoping someone like Marcus didn't win again. A soft ping pulled me from my thoughts. An email from the CEO. "Heard your talk, made an impression. Proud to have you representing us. Let's talk about expanding your role next quarter." I closed the laptop, didn't even respond. Not yet. I poured a glass of water, stepped out onto the balcony, and just stood there, breathing, no rush, no performance, just me. That's what Marcus never understood. He thought influence was noise, volume, applause. But the real kind? It's quiet. It's earned. It walks into a room without needing to announce itself. And as I stood there, wind brushing against my shirt, I realized something. I didn't need a toast to mark the end of that chapter. I'd already made it. I flew back Sunday evening, watching the lights of the city bleed into darkness as the plane climbed above the clouds. No turbulence, no announcements, just the quiet hum of momentum carrying me forward. Monday morning, I arrived at the office before anyone else. The halls were still, the kind of stillness you only get before 8, when the building is still deciding what kind of day it's going to be. I walked past the conference rooms where Marcus used to perform, where he used to pace, talk over people, dominate conversations with his perfect tie and polished pitch. It was strange. The place didn't feel lighter without him. It felt honest. I stepped into my new office. Larger window, better view, but still mine. Still simple, still grounded. On my desk was a note, not an email, not a memo, A handwritten note, small, folded once, no envelope. It just said, "You were right. I should have spoken up. Thank you for doing what I couldn't." AR, no signature, just the initial. I knew who it was, one of the quiet ones. One of the names Marcus had stepped over, probably sitting 2 floors down, finally breathing again. I slipped the note into my top drawer, not to keep, not as a trophy, as a reminder. I spent most of that morning clearing my inbox, setting priorities for the quarter, and checking in with my team. At lunch, we went out. No formal agenda, just a shared table and unforced conversation. No one talked about promotions. No one brought up Marcus. But there was an ease that hadn't been there before. They were working for something now, not against someone. That afternoon, I was asked to sit in on a mentorship panel for new hires. I almost declined, almost said I was too busy. But then I thought about how it started, how Marcus had once leaned over and called my methods old school, how that moment lodged itself so deep I remembered it 6 years later. I showed up, spoke last. When they asked me what advice I'd give someone trying to rise through the ranks without losing themselves, I paused for a long moment. The room was still, waiting. Then I said, "You don't have to play dirty to win. You just have to play longer than the people who burn out trying." A few heads nodded. One of them wrote it down. As I left the room, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Marcus, not at the company, not even at the years I spent staying quiet when I should have spoken up sooner. It all led here. And this was the real win. Not the title, not the office, but knowing I never let someone else's poison rewrite who I was. That, in the end, was the only legacy worth building. That Friday, just before I was about to pack up for the weekend, I got an email with a subject line that simply read, "Final note." It was from Marcus. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I wasn't sure what I expected. An apology, a threat, some self-justifying manifesto. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a final attempt to spin the truth one last time. But what I read surprised me. "Elliot, you probably don't want to hear from me, and I wouldn't blame you if you deleted this without reading. But for what it's worth, I wanted to say it anyway. I didn't think I'd lose. Not because I was better, but because I was louder. I assumed that if I kept talking long enough, people would stop listening to you. That's how it's always worked for me. Talk fast, talk often, and they start mistaking noise for leadership. But you didn't shout, you didn't scramble, you just waited, and that silence, that's what undid me. I don't know what comes next for me. I burned too many bridges to turn around now. But I hope you use the position you've earned to build something better than we had before. Something real. This isn't an apology. I'm not there yet. But it's a start. Maybe the first honest thing I've said in years. I read it once. Then again. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel pity. Just clarity. Marcus was exactly who I always thought he was. But now he knew it too. And maybe that was the beginning of something for him. Or maybe it was just the end. Either way, it wasn't my job to carry it. I closed the email. Didn't reply. Instead, I shut down my computer, grabbed my coat, and left the office with no weight on my shoulders for the first time in a long time. Outside, the air was crisp. That quiet kind of cold that doesn't bite, it just wakes you up. I stopped by the bookstore on the way home. Picked up a book on leadership I'd seen a junior associate reading last week. He'd said it reminded him of how I handled the Marcus situation. "You don't act like most people in power," he told me. "You listen first." I'd nodded at the time but didn't say much. I'm still getting used to the idea that people are listening now. That evening, as I sat on the porch, book in hand, streetlights blinking on one by one, I thought about how different everything looked, not just around me, but inside me. It wasn't revenge that changed my life. It was patience. And the quiet conviction that I didn't need to destroy anyone to protect myself. I just had to stop letting them write my story. Because in the end, the real power wasn't in the toast. It was in the silence that followed and what I chose to do with it. Spring came early that year. It was subtle at first. The way the wind softened, the way the sunlight stretched its fingers just a little longer across the office windows. Most people didn't notice, but I did. I'd been noticing everything lately. Not out of paranoia, but awareness. After months of living with my instincts in high gear, ready for the next blindside, I'd finally come back down, settled into a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't peace, not completely, but it was something close. One morning as I walked into the office, I passed the HR director, Carla, in the hallway. She paused, gave me a small smile, tight-lipped, polite. "You know," she said, "you could have let us handle it. The Marcus situation." "I did," I said quietly. "Eventually," she tilted her head. "That's not what I meant." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by framed leadership quotes and the faint hum of the copy machine. "You didn't humiliate him. You didn't go public. You didn't retaliate." She exhaled through her nose. "I've worked here 15 years, Elliot. I've never seen anyone take a hit like that and not swing back harder." "I wasn't trying to win," I said. "I was trying to be able to live with myself." Her smile widened slightly. "Well, you succeeded. More than you know." She walked off before I could ask what she meant. That afternoon, I was called into the CEO's office again. "A casual meeting," he said. "Just a check-in." But when I sat down, he slid a new file across the desk. "Companies restructuring our leadership model," he said. "We're looking at building a culture team, people we trust to shape the next generation of leadership. You've been selected." I opened the file. My name was at the top of the list. Not a promotion, not a title boost, something more permanent, something foundational. He leaned back. "After what happened, we realized we've been rewarding the wrong kind of success. We need leaders who don't just get results, but who leave people better than they found them." I looked down at the file, then back at him. "I don't play politics," he smirked. "We're counting on that." That night, I left the office later than usual. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I stayed behind to draft a new mentorship initiative for junior staff. Nothing big, just something I wish someone had offered me when I was starting out. As I rode the elevator down, alone, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors. Same face, same tired eyes. But something behind them had shifted. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was legacy, and I was finally writing it on my own terms. No sabotage, no shortcuts, just work done right, quiet, steady. And this time, I wasn't the one giving the toast. I was the one building the table. The company holiday gala came around again, 12 months to the day since the night everything changed. Same venue, same stage, same gold-lit chandeliers dripping with quiet luxury. But this time, the air felt different, lighter, realer, less tension pretending to be elegance. I wasn't seated at the head table. I asked not to be. Instead, I sat with my team, my people, the ones who'd taken my single rule and built a culture around it. No knives and backs, no pretending, just accountability, respect, and real collaboration. The kind of success that doesn't depend on who you can outmaneuver, but on who you can uplift. Midway through dinner, the CEO stepped up to the podium. He gave the usual speech: growth, innovation, goals. Then as the room settled into dessert, he cleared his throat and added something else. "There's someone here who changed the course of this company," he said, "not with a viral campaign or a record-breaking quarter, but with quiet, steady courage." I felt every head at the table turn. He didn't expose a problem for attention. He didn't escalate for applause. He just chose to do the right thing and kept doing it, even when it would have been easier not to. Then he raised a glass. "To Elliot Grant." The room stood. People clapped, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. I stood too, slowly, not to make a speech, just to acknowledge the moment. I raised my glass, this time filled with nothing but water, and held it up. "Here's to the quiet ones," I said. "The ones who don't need spotlights to lead, just purpose." That was it. Short, simple, true. I sat down and the clapping faded. Conversation returned. The night rolled on. Later, as I stepped outside for air, I felt a familiar presence beside me. My old intern, now a junior manager, leaned on the railing, coat over his arm. "You think it's always going to be this hard?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him. Young, smart, still carrying that edge of uncertainty, waiting for someone to validate that he belonged. No, I said, only when it matters. He nodded, quietly satisfied, then disappeared back inside. I stayed out there a while longer, watching the stars try to fight through the city haze, breathing in the cool night, letting it settle. And for the first time I realized, this wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of one. Not about Marcus, not about the betrayal, but about what you do after the storm clears, about who you become when no one's watching. The real toast wasn't made on stage, it was made here, in the quiet, with no applause, no ceremony, just a man who stood his ground, told the truth, and built something worth staying for.